Hi, everyone. Welcome to this discussion of The Gallant by Janny Wurts. This is a novella which can be read at any time, but preferably after reading the first book or maybe the first two books of The Wars of Light and Shadow, because it tells the backstory of some characters that we meet in Curse of the Mistwraith. Uh, we are going to be starting The Fugitive Prince in October. We'll be meeting sometime around the 7th of October to discuss, and then videos will be posted every 2 weeks after. This is just something that we're reading while we're on the break to get to Fugitive Prince. So with me, I have the usual wonderful people for the Wars of Light and Shadow discussions. Chibipoe, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Of course. I'm Chibipoe. Hang around on page tuning forums and, promote stuff on Twitter. Long-time reader of all kinds of stuff. So, and Chris.
I like this. I like this past the parcel. This is nice. My name's Chris Moen. Sometimes YouTuber, sometimes appear on other people's channels like now. And this novella has fixed my, I wouldn't call it a reading slump. It's a reading, not have time for reading slump. But this actually, as Janny has a what to do, has a way of both fixing it and also making you realize that well, couldn't all books be like this?
Yeah. The blessing and the curse of books you love. Jared.
Excellent question, Chris. I'm Jared. I have the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and I also haunt the page chewing forums and do a blog there as well.
Haunt the page chewing forums. I like that. I'm going to steal that joke because I'm there all the time.
Yes,
But
you are.
Steve-
I see you.
Steve does like a bit of horror as well, so it's thematically appropriate, language.
Yeah, so this book was all kinds of heartbreaking. So I had a question for Chibipoe. I know you reread the series a lot. Do you also read the novellas? And if you do, how do you bring yourself to reread this one?
I've read this one a couple of times now.
Mhm.
And yeah, it never fails to get me every time because and it's I know I haven't had a lot of trouble rereading it. I mean it hits me hard every time, but I don't know. It while it's still in her style, it also just kind of feels different. Because she's even said, that this is a, a love story within 100 pages, and she doesn't get particularly explicit in her wording, but it's probably the most sexualized activity we see from anybody across the series. Barring, some moments that you haven't got to, yet in the main series, but yeah, it is. Yeah, it's kind of a gut punch.
Yeah. But it is like if that, what is that Hemingway book everyone hates the ending of, A Farewell to Arms? It's like if the readers of that book actually got closure, That's what this book reads like. Yeah, what did you both think, Chris, Jared?
I mean, I loved it. I mean, it's again, novellas, you aren't supposed to care about characters so much within 30 pages. Like, it's very, very classic Janny, I think, in some ways. Like, I think we've discussed this many times where you can introduce a character and by the end of the chapter, you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to see more of this character. It matters to me what happens to them. And
Yeah.
I really like the juxtaposition of having, for the most part, a female character as the center of the story as opposed to like Ascendir and Arathon as well, and actually seeing, again, in some ways, I think her traits would be sort of considered masculine. In some ways, that kind of honor and stuff, and also, I mean, I'm sure we'll get to this, but the idea that Varian is the gallant, And Gallant is a title that's earned, not given.
Mm.
In some ways, that the idea of gallantry is one that you earn rather than just kind of
Mhm.
like, this is what your profession is,
Mm.
or this is what your title is. And I think that's something worth discussing. Those are the kind of things that I came away from
Mm.
with.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting that was he called the Gallant right in the at the beginning of the book?
I think so. Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah.
And he was actually quite the womanizer. Really,
Mhm.
he was all over society. Prior to meeting Lysiane, is that how you say it?
Mhm.
And it was amazing, the description that Janny used to describe the effect that she had on him after meeting her, and going through the little bit of society in that town that they were in to begin with. And I thought that was just a fascinating character piece on both their parts, to really delve into that and like Chris said, make you care about those characters that quickly. And then, like you said as well, to bring them to the point where it's a real tearjerker
Mm.
by the time you get to the not even the end of the book. It was like
80%,
3 or 4
wasn't it
chapters
exactly?
before
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
And so that move, because I read this first back in April or May,
Oh, that's
Mm.
right. I forgot
and
about
that it was my favorite book of the month back then, because it raised those emotions like no other book back then had at the time had. And it was it was it was short, 96 pages or whatever,
Mhm.
but powerful. Short but
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was brilliant. I loved finding out Lorraine's back history, of course. The and I guess the depth that brings to Lorraine's character. We've met him a couple of times, but
it.
he doesn't, well, at least to me, he didn't mean much other than, someone like Dakar, except slightly more civilized. In and But the I guess the depth and sort of the poignancy the story adds to the fact that what centuries later he's maintaining vigil at that must be such a boring job, and also so demanding also, it seems like, because when we see him in the end, for millennia he's been coming to visit her grave, and he's got all these scars on his hand, so it's also a very demanding job that he's been doing for so long. I'm still reeling from the story. So it is really, really well done. I loved both their characters. I loved the view we got into the magic. We I don't think we've seen the world's magic or science quite this way in the books that we've read so far, because the Mistrates bogged it all down. But the flux currents and the verges between the Paravian land and where humans are allowed to inhabit. I thought that was really cool. All the magic and resonance that we talked about, that's all really explicitly talked about in this book, right?
Yeah, like for all it's a really tight character piece. There's so much that she puts in here. Like, we had the discussions with her where she's mentioned that the world's got a higher electromagnetic resonance, and
Mm-hmm.
all the details, and they're just on full display here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And we see that, like, a little backstory to the towns and the clans folk feud,
Yeah.
and we also learn, of course, hey, look, guess who was helping stir it along.
Yeah.
Even though we never see them directly doing anything, but it gets precisely stated that, hey, there's a group who were pushing this along. And
Mm. Yeah.
And who were they called in this? It was Myrtle Vane. What is it?
the swamp,
Myrtle Vane.
The
it was
swamp.
Myrtle Vane.
Yeah.
but yeah, the Coriani and
Mm.
stirring the pot, and just like, hey, look, we don't let you just wander wherever you want because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's like,
Mm.
that's what we saw. It's like, yeah, you don't wander too close to the unicorns. Migrating,
Mm.
will have deleterious effects on you. They don't intend to, but they just do.
Mm. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, did we catch just since we've just finished Warhost, not that long ago. Did you catch the parallels with what happens at the Ass Hostel?
Yeah.
I know it's later in there, and
I
what
did not.
happened
So you'll have to
with
you'll have to tell
Lysair's
me.
visit.
I don't know about the panels that come before this, but the part where the hostel got completely destroyed after Lysair's visit, and similarly for after Varaine's visit, except in the case of Varaine, it was for a good cause, and Lysair just willfully destroyed the hostel, right? If I remember correctly.
He damaged it a lot. He didn't,
Uh,
Okay.
oh, with
like empty it out, but yeah, like Varaine just like did his whole thing, when he swore himself to repurposed himself and like and did so I know it's come up a few times, but we've seen that particular hostel in the present time as to where it's at and what it's being used for now.
fourth mark. I don't remember.
Since it got basically decommissioned, it's a Coriani spot now.
Oh, that's right.
It's all Mass Adepts left.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, so many little things, and like the guardian, the Centaur Guardian erected a monument, a stone monument, like half a day's ride east of Ganesh. Does that come into play later? Do we see that?
I don't think we've seen that in the main series.
We haven't seen that yet. Okay.
No, I don't think
I
so.
don't know. I don't know if we ever do, but if we do,
well, it's just there's so many little things like that, displayed throughout the story, that I was always like wondering, like almost every paragraph, I'm wondering, where do we see this? Have we seen it yet, or are we going to see it? And it was actually a lot. There's a lot in here.
Yeah.
But I think that's why it's worth reading a few of the books first before reading the Gallant. I'm sure you notice the difference actually the second time you read it. Even more so than a normal reread, Jared, where you're like, I know a bit about a lot of these things, or at least I've had exposure to them somewhere along the line.
Right.
Like I was amazed by like what's about 600-700 years difference.
600,
yeah, that are here, and like how prevalent the Praevians are then compared to now, and that they're doing, how meddlesome and openly meddlesome the Coriani were then compared to now.
Yeah.
Like it's all of the things, the little changes that we see between them, and then how some things are still exactly the same, like how the Fellowship are just nowhere to be seen around what humanity would call big events, but ultimately I don't think they are big events, in the big scheme of things. I mean, this is such a minor story insofar as this was Varaine's story about how he came to then volunteer himself to the Fellowship as I say an apprentice. That wasn't the word they used, but yes, once he gets in that position, and how what he does now is influenced by what happened in what he would call is probably his living life, or the time before he should have died, and it's how that kind of influences what he does now and how devoted he is to it. It's born out of a very painful memory for him,
Yeah. There was something that I was thinking of just as you were talking. The Fellowship, the Paravian presence, even now we're sort of seeing it disperse a little bit, I guess. So sort of the origin story of the Mistwraith as well, sort of. Like we've heard a lot about when it comes in, but I didn't realize, I if you had asked me to guess before reading this book, I would have said, the invasion of the Mistwraith happened over the course of a few days or something. But we see this happen over the course of multiple seasons, and they're still fighting it. The world isn't covered in mist yet. And so I thought that was interesting also, that it's such a long, drawn-out struggle. And it is a big deal, but it seems like the Fellowship isn't... Well, they are taking it seriously, of course, but they don't think that it would be the threat that it might turn out to be, because Luhane's just chilling in his tower and eating muffins, and and Caradmon's taking all sorts of detours before he gets to the battle scene to fight the Mistwraith.
Some
So
things never change.
yeah. Yes, I thought that was interesting too, to see the things that are happening in the distance, right? Like what Chibipoe said about the sowing of unrest with the within the townsfolk, and then the Mistwraiths coming in, but we're focusing on these two central characters. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
It sort of struck me by the end a bit to what Jared was saying about the Center Guardian. The bonfire, they're not bonfires, but the beacons that they set up on a while. It seems to me that in the 700 years that there were mechanisms set in place for townsfolk and humanity to ward off the threat, but they got lax about it over time, and that's how the Mistwraith ended up then coming and taking over. Over a period of time, creeping on. People got complacent about the threat of it. People weren't taking attention. They were just kind of saying, a bit like Modern World. Oh, I didn't hear about it. It mustn't be happening, or it's not a problem. Like a bit like, I have to make such a big parallel, but like the threat of a ecological breakdown in the world that we have today is sort of the same thing, where people are going, well, I can't see it. I can't see any difference to my climate. It was a bit rainy this year, but it was a bit warmer, and this doesn't make sense. And sort of the same idea is I think the seeds are planted in here.
Yeah. We got snow. What do you mean global warming?
It's nearly September now.
You're right, and the townsfolk and the clansfolk are still going at it, in their squabbles, and not seeing the bigger picture, like you said.
So I may have my timelines a bit confused. I thought this was... So did they ward off the Mistwraith right now, and then it completed its invasion 500 years from now? Is that what happened? Or is this the beginning of the Mistwraith invasion, and now it's going to take over the world?
I'd have to look up the exact date of the incursion, but I know they've got it. It's come through Southgate, and I think he's not mentioned, but I believe Trace has been injured by this point, and so right now it's like all the primary royalty and whatnot are all off. I'm looking at the map now, off to the west over at Earl, and containing it there to stop its incursion, and that leaves not a lot of people riding herd on what the townsfolk and stuff are doing, and so
Got it. Okay.
Who was injured again?
Trace.
The Raven Fellowship sorcerer.
The one with the raven. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay, that's right.
Yeah, he got injured in cutting off Southgate. So,
and it might part a lot of it's supposition. Like it's very much the Mistwraith isn't here. There obviously isn't a mist descended over it, but they do refer to things like people just not being attentive to the danger. They're kind of not heeding the signs or not warning the signs. It just speaks that in this period of time, to me anyway, that people get slack about the threat of the other parts of the world that they could not see, that weren't really humanity. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then that they thought it was sort of the Fellowship's responsibility to manage that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they're all the fellowship. It's like my impression is it's one of those. It's like, yeah, the fellowship and all are just off doing this thing, and they haven't really told us anything about it. Just we just know something happened and they all ran off, and
Yeah.
they're like, oh hey, look, no one's paying attention to us. Let's start making trouble.
Yeah. So in the future, I don't remember where it was, probably sometime in the Curse of the Mistrait, we saw that some Paravian lands were sort of desecrated or destroyed by humans. And I expect that was done after the Paravians left, because right now we're seeing this huge segregation of land that Paravians live in and humans are allowed to come in and out of. So I guess they just hated the Paravians afterwards. Was it for leaving, or just generally the that Big Brother didn't take care of us when the Mistrait came in?
That's a good question.
Part of it, because they mention it with Atara,
Hmm.
is just and Janny told us some of that where they wanted to they wanted more trade routes and to be able to use the land for farming and stuff, and they're like, well, we can't do this because these reasons, and so they went to all that trouble just to dam that river up and redirect it, which turned
Right.
the uh, Dion Ramon in Rathan into from like these fertile grasslands and called the golden plains or whatever, and into just a dried up ruin that the Peruvians wouldn't return to, just because they're like, yeah, we don't like Peruvians, we don't want to deal with them anymore, so we're gonna dam up and make this entire area almost into desert.
Yeah. It seems clear now that they couldn't have done that while the Paravians were still populating the world, right? Because
Yeah.
apparently you can't even expose yourself to a Paravian without going mad. That was pretty cool. We didn't actually see any of the centaurs or unicorns, but just their presence was so felt in the book. I thought that was really interesting how we felt their presence, which we have absolutely no wind of in the series as we're reading through so far. But also, we never really actually saw them on the page.
Yeah, the only thing we've seen in the main series so far is that the illusion that I think Caradmon put up previously.
Yeah.
But no, there was a definite sense that they were far more present and something for the humans to be concerned about on a consistent basis. And I love how I think Varane had a exposure, right, at some point, but he was in that reduced mental state from the poisoning, and I wonder, you wonder how much that affected him. It had to have affected him to get him to the point where he would be a sorcerer later on. And I love how Janny tied the events of his poisoning that led up to the exposure, that led up to the, him taking the oath and all that stuff. I thought it was beautifully done, and I really like how she portrayed Varane in that reduced state. It was touching. It was tragic all at the same time. It was really well done.
Yeah. Did we get a Varane POV before he went mad? I think we didn't after he was poisoned. But even before that, it was maybe one paragraph at most, but even that, it could have been from someone else's point of view, if I remember correctly.
It's not substantial.
Did Well, did we get some point of view of his viewpoint of Lysiane?
Yeah, but
Uh,
we get by the end of the book kind of a measure of his feelings toward her,
mhm,
especially as he's
Yeah.
holding her and cradling her and then finds her. I think that's his point of view, isn't it? That
mhm.
that part.
Yeah.
But early on in the book, I'm not so sure because again, it's about his strength. We are told about his strength of character, which doesn't seem to be high at the
Mm,
start. I mean, as I would say, one of the interesting things about it is we are predisposed as readers to instantly dislike that kind of character, the
mm,
womanizing, the one who lauds on their talents, I suppose, in battle or otherwise. Like we're predisposed not to like those characters, but here very
mm.
quickly,
Yeah.
probably because of what happens to him and how he doesn't seem like a bad character. We're predisposed to like him
Yeah.
and listen to him, whereas others aren't.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
she tried to protect him even before he got poisoned, and she was too late
Mm,
getting there. So she was definitely taken with him,
yeah.
before that point. And he, because he did show her respect uh,
Hmm.
at the ball or whatever it is they went to there. And so there were the positive qualities of his character even before all the events that happened. Um,
Hmm.
so he was a rake, at points, but in the past, but he also wasn't a complete bastard.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they made, she made clear through it that he was, you know, he liked women
Hmm.
and, like sleeping around and all, but he wasn't like disrespectful,
Mm,
you know, um, to anyone about it.
Yeah, but
right.
just why it's key, I think, that it was Lysiane's perspective that we were hearing from, what she'd heard about him rather than actually him identifying himself as that. It was very much, tales on the grapevine, so to speak. This is what I'd heard about him. But you see an attentiveness and an attention to detail into her as a
Hmm.
character that I suppose you're initially suspicious of, but that actually very clearly becomes, really what his intent was all along.
Genuine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I think it was very interesting. Their relationship was uh, throughout the book, right? Because one, we're getting everything from Lysiane's perspective in terms of their relationship, and we know that she's incredibly devoted because of, I guess, how he took care of her after she had been insulted. But one, it's not super clear at that point, and until the very end, even whether Varane was, just being honorable, meaning serving a higher purpose or different purpose than, actually just taking care of her, uh, or if he actually had liked her the way was devoted to her the way she was, and whatever affection develops over time in Varane for Lysiane, whether it's because he's reciprocating what he's getting from her, she's the only choice he has, so to speak, throughout the course of the book after he's been poisoned, uh, which means that, maybe it's not a really dedicated relationship. Perhaps, like, there were all these doubts in my mind as I was reading them, so it was pretty gratifying to finally get that Varane point of view and be told that, he would have been devoted to her if nothing had gone wrong. He would have chosen her as his only one, and they would have maybe built a life together, which also was really sad because it was a bit of like what might have been. But yeah, I thought that whole will they, won't they, but sort of done very differently than you might normally expect. I thought it was done really beautifully.
Yeah, and that's a sign of good writing when
Mm,
you have those doubts
mm,
and you have those questions, and it's not just you know dumped on you like
yeah.
this is how they feel.
Mm,
You should.
yeah.
It's just really good that you should be questioning. Well, is this character genuine or is he
Mm,
not? And and it's all from her perspective, but she's also getting a lot of stuff on the grapevine too.
Mm.
And who knows how much of that's real and how much of it is not real. And so it was just really satisfying to have these questions in my own mind,
Mm.
and while this is going on, while also trying to pay attention to the story as well.
Yeah.
'Cause every chapter, you have to think back to previous chapters to know to try to figure out how much of how many how much could be real and might not be. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And how much you have to guess at as to how they're going to react coming up, whether they're going to surprise you and stuff. And it was all very surprising. It was just very well done.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I
And
think one of
go
the
ahead.
more interesting things to me was the treatment of people of Rain when he went from being the Gallant to being this what you would consider mentally compromised. You
Mm.
know, again, hard not to look at that as how people treat people with disability or
Yeah.
otherwise, you know, and how they sort of write them off from society in some ways. As of it was almost as if they were. I mean, the whole plan was for him to become an embarrassment to his family then by how compromised his mental acuity was. But even though he could give another set of gifts, people weren't willing to accept that or look at that, you know. And otherwise, we as the reader are going, oh, pay attention. But
Yeah.
but everybody else in the world is very dismissive of him. Even when he shows time and time again that actually his consciousness is in another plane.
Yep.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
very poignant stuff there. The attitude of the people towards him and stuff like that. Heartbreaking in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it was. I think, especially like you said, Chris, with what we know when he's going on about how the sky will disappear or the sun will disappear, I suppose. Or so we know that if we are reading this after the curse of the mystery, we know that he's speaking the truth, that he's predicting events to come. So when Satan, is that his name? Binds him up, but he's going on about, I need to go find Licia, and that something's coming, something bad is probably happening to Licia at that moment, and you're like, stop, just let him go, don't tie him up. And yeah, that I agree that is that no one was taking him seriously. But did they have reason to? Did he say? Yeah, I guess they did at that point, right? Because he was chasing down the Muttle and he went wandering off because he knew that they had been released and he was going to warn the townsfolk. So maybe that wasn't clear to them. Maybe they thought that he just happened to encounter the townsfolk in his wanderings. But we knew as readers that that it was probably all very intentional.
And they were trying to be protective of his safety, general safety.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they probably didn't understand what he was trying to do. So it really was a tough situation.
Yeah, yeah. Even Licia, and I think she didn't know to take everything he said seriously. He was. I guess it sounded like rambling, but it really wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like rambling, but only if you don't have a frame of reference for it. Whereas it's I'm not really. It's like your awareness of the here and now is unmoored. I guess it's like everybody else is in the here and now, and you're seeing decades ahead. So you're not seeing the same time reference that everybody else is because your mind is off.
Yeah.
Awareness because of the Sears weed and whatnot. So you're like, oh yeah, like when Earthen's using it for scrying to see the properties. Only you have no control over it. It's just sending you off wherever. And so you're seeing stuff that may happen, or will happen, and then you're rambling about it, and everybody's like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
Janny won't thank me for this comparison, but it's almost like we were reading it like it's almost like Yoda speak. You know when Yoda says something in Star Wars, and you're like, "Oh, but that has deep meaning," and nobody else is picking up on it because they just think he's an idiot with the way he's speaking. You know, this kind of thing. I think as the reader, we were looking at his ramblings and kind of going, actually, but what does he see?
Mm-hmm.
What does he see that nobody else sees? And because we're informed in that way and possibly know who he is and exactly what the types of things that he's saying that they can't perceive, we're kind of going, oh, right. And it's a really nice way to foreshadow a lot of ways, and it'll give the reader something to hang on to. And that means, exactly as Varsha says, when he is trying to turn back and save Lysiane, we know something's wrong as a reader. We know that he knows, whereas everybody else in the thing just think he's going off wandering again. Oh, the crazed man, the fool. But again, we know, regardless of what happens and where they're going, that they're going to go back to something bad now. This is sort of circle already there. Very clever.
Yeah. I thought that was very clever too. That want to change topics unless we want to talk about that a bit more, but I wanted to discuss the enormity of Varaine's sacrifice in the end, because he was very close to being reconnected with Lysiane, right? And I was unclear about how the afterlife works in this world, whether they just disappear and become stardust, or and meaning that it's not that big of a sacrifice. He's just choosing to, well, it is still a pretty big self-sacrifice, but in terms of losing what he could get with eternity with Lysiane, I think that's explicitly called out later, that's what he gave up to be a guardian of the swamp. I think that comes back to what you mentioned earlier, Chris, about being given the title of the Gallant and earning the title. I guess that's when he earns it. Maybe he did earlier, but we haven't seen it on the page.
Yeah, completely. I think that's kind of the nice play of the title on the words, because by the end of the book, he definitely is the Gallant, because he has done the courageous sacrificial thing at the end. He has displayed gallantry, whereas at the start it was kind of like an anointed title, which he may have earned. There's we don't know that, but when you combine it with the kind of wastrel description that we were given him, and we kind of feel like maybe people have circumvented what the meaning of the word gallantry actually means within that kind of context.
Yeah. There was also a bravo or something, which it felt like these were titles that were given to certain ranks in society, right? But yeah, I also like the aspect of trying to fix your previous failures, even if it came at great cost. It felt like so in failing to be reunited with Lysiane, it's not just he who's affected, right? But she seems to be happy. She's shining more brightly than she did in life, and she seems like she's contented. So he's not hurting her by not reuniting with her. So now he's just going back to sort of fix his failures, which I guess it's not something I relate to personally, but I've seen people I really admire and respect who try very hard to go back and change things that they've messed up or that were because of circumstances out of their control. So yeah, I really appreciated that aspect of it too.
Yeah,
it's
well
hard.
done.
Yeah, but it's hard. It was hard for me, certainly as a reader, to kind of know that he picked the right thing, though. You know what I mean? He's sort of, we can look in retrospect and know what he does later on within the story and kind of how important the role that he plays and what he's doing and what his sacrifice is. But in some ways, it felt like he deserved the sort of ascension that he was going to get. He was robbed of a life in some ways. He was robbed of a future, and it's whether the choice he knew in the choice that he would come back as a whole individual then, or whether that was just he didn't know what he was coming back as. So it was like kind of it was a choice that I don't think was clear what was going to happen, if you know what I mean, for him. So, and maybe that its own right is gallantry. You know, is the idea that he was going to come back regardless of what happened, and it just so happened that he came back and he could do the self-sacrificial thing, a bit like the car done at the end of
Yeah.
spoilers. Nobody hasn't seen it, but there we go. You know, it's kind of a very similar kind of offering of themselves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that. And
Yeah.
did you understand when I there was a line about several years after, excuse me, Lysian's inspiration left the world or something like that, and I wasn't sure whether that meant that he lost his that if and when he eventually died that he'd be reunited with Lysian, or that it's just her memory faded from the world, like
Yeah.
people forgot about her. But then, like, how many people did remember her sacrifice in the first place? I was curious about that. How did you guys interpret that part of the book? Let me see if I can find the sentence.
So
Varian would defend the land's wheel for centuries after his Lysian's inspiration faded from common memory.
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
So her inspiration was, to me, when the soldiers came back and said, because they were sort of dismissive of her for a long time, and that they see actually she was leading them, with by standing up for him and doing all the rest of them to actually their salvation. They kind of appreciated her and him in return, and after the whole events of while a lot of people died, more would have died, etc., and that they felt inspired at that time. Whereas obviously that is a fleeting moment. In the course of a life, and that after a while, people will forget who she is, kind of what she stood for, and that she will probably just become a name on a family tree somewhere. That she was second daughter of, that kind of thing.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just my reading of it.
Yeah, it's good. Another thing I liked was the character turnaround of Sethan.
Yeah.
When he has he's coming back off of hunting or something like that, and he first has to take on this burden of leading Varane around, protecting him, and guiding Lysian as well. And he's at first he's just very gruff. He doesn't want to be doing this, you can tell, and he's almost angry that this is kind of forced upon him. And then, similar to how Janny does character turnarounds in some of the other novels we've already read, he comes around and he starts seeing what they're trying to do, and he's the one who has to put Lysian down, right, because of the wound and the House of Arid and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And his viewpoint changes on what he has got to do, and how he relates to these other characters, the two main characters, was so well done as far as how his view to them turned around through their shared journey and stuff like that. And it reminded me a lot of some of the other turnaround, Takar, and also even Tharic in the earlier novels and stuff like that. I love, that is a huge strength in Janny's writing that I love to see come out.
Yeah. Yep. I absolutely agree. I also love the sort of parallel-ish between Satan, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but when he realizes that his promise was broken, sort of, and Varane also, that he couldn't keep his promise to Lysian, and both of them to her, right? And that brings about some enormous changes in character or destiny for the characters that I thought was really interesting as well. Their sense of honor, or more than that, even how much they tended to appreciate the character that they were doing this for, right? Like Lysian, how much they came to like her, I suppose. So starting as someone who was mocked at because it's easy to, and turning around to someone for whom someone like Satan would drag Varane with him for a whole season to bring him to an arts adept hostel. That was really brilliant. I agree, Jared. That was really nicely done.
And the little touches where he's asked, I mean, there's a lot in the story about fate and how things are fated to be, and how choices and things that happened, they were obviously supposed to happen, and talk about the fact that did you choose to be a tracker? And he says, no, this was just what I was meant to be my whole life. And but the little tidbit about him, was it a baker or shopkeeper or something? He says, no, if I could have chosen anything, I could have been a baker. And then he says, I can't believe you bought that about a baker. Like, I look like the bacon kind kind of thing, and then it might have been a blacksmith by another hand. But those are little touches that give you an insight into, his sarcasm, his kind of gruff nature, and the fact that he has that, but he also has a lightness to kind of not let it go too far, to kind of say, no, there's like a kindness to say, I'm not the type to pull your wool over your eyes. I'll be straight with you at a certain point. I'm just kind of putting a little test out there to see what you know or what you think. It's all very, very clever character work.
I actually bought it when he said, I want to open a tea shop. I think I wrote down Uncle Iro in my notes. But it's too bad he didn't turn out to be like Uncle Iro. What was his tea shop called? The Dragon Tea Shop. Anyway.
I did like the glimpse, was we saw the camp of the Clansfolk that were out there. And we've gotten the present day sort of the vibes about how the townsfolk viewed the clans, and the impression that it's like tyranny, and they saw it as tyranny, and the sort of impression that they thought the clansfolk were just living it up, and on this land that they weren't allowed to, the townsfolk weren't allowed to set foot on. But then we saw what the clansfolk that are out there, in the wilds were actually doing. And they're not really living it up. Like, they're busy and they're working, and, like when Lysians, they're like, here's what you need. We're giving you this gear. Make your clothes, and everybody's doing, errands and work. And it's like, this is a far, 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 cry from, we're living, we're living the high life, the way the townsfolk, and being, laughing it up over the townsfolk being stuck in their little towns, while we just go out here and live like kings or whatever. And they're definitely not.
Yeah, I did wonder when we read about the curse of the Mystery, when we read about this rift between clansfolk and clansmen and townsfolk. I don't, but I was wondering if the people who now sort of rule the towns, if they drove out the clansfolk who lived there, that they were the original rulers, and maybe they were tyrants for whatever reason, and the townsfolk have now become tyrants in their own right. But it feels like, from reading this book, that dynamic that we saw in the later books was always there, except it wasn't as violent. It was just the sort of mutual hatred, which in this book seems more from the part of the townsfolk than the clans people, but for the reasons you mentioned, Chibipoe. But it feels like that dynamic was always there, and the townsfolk took action now that there was no one to stop them, and the Paravians were gone from the world, and so they were able to drive out the rulers who were being quote unquote tyrants, not actual tyrants before. So
well, she's not just with us, but some of the others, because I went through and outlined them, like just the fractures of between the clans and the townsfolk, where the townsfolk were constantly like doing the, yes, we want to expand, we want to we want more land, more, and the like Jenny said, that the within the towns, as long as they didn't violate certain rules, they just do whatever they want.
Mm.
It's only if so no one's telling them, no, you can't do this, unless it's a certain thing, specifically prescribed actions like necromancy and whatnot. But because of the Pravian presence, they can't just go out and build farms and trade routes and do whatever they want, and they don't like that because they're often restricted to like coastal areas and the weather's a little more extreme, and so like, oh look, there's a hurricane and just flattened everything, and we want to move inland, but we can't do that.
Yeah.
So it's like I think that there is antipathy, but it seems like it's more from the townsfolk who feel like they neither know nor care if about the reasons why they can't do these things. They just see these things as I can't do these things. You're just oppressing me. Help! I'm being oppressed. See the violence inherent in the system.
Yeah. It feels like there'll be a lot of political equivalence in today's time with the behavior of the townsfolk.
Yeah, and it did seem like it was variable depending on how bad it was. In some areas, like the impression I got was like if we were up in Rathan, it was a lot more hostile because a lot of Rathan's land was just there was no allowances they could make whatsoever, and the one outlets they tried to come up with, the townsfolk, we don't want that, absolutely refusing to compromise. But on the same note, they're like, we can't give you this area through here because this is a major migration route, or the residence is so high that you try to go through here and it's going to mess you all up.
Yeah, they're being protected for their own safety in many ways because they're sharing the land with the Paravians, but they're like, no, we want to be more grabby about this.
Yeah, from the outside, things that I'd heard about the Gallant was very much about the investigation of the relationship between clanspeople, townsfolk, etc. They're in there, and maybe it's because I was looking at all the other things that if I hadn't read the series, I wouldn't know anything about, like the Paravians, the fact that lots of people speak the Paravian tongue and not just Arathon and the Fellowship. I thought those kind of things all fascinated me. But the townsfolk, clansfolk, it was very much a secondary thing within, or maybe tertiary thing, maybe within the entire story. You know, of what it goes. You do get a sense of it just by living in the world and seeing the interactions of the characters between each other. But it was much more about the other things for me in this book rather than that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For me too. I think apart from Rain and Lysian, I primarily highlighted the stuff around the magic and the nature of the world with the prime resonances and I think things like the magnetic field and electromagnetic forces, things like that were explicitly named, which we don't see. At least I don't remember seeing anything about the magnetism of the world written about in the later books that we've read yet. But yeah, I think just that's what I zeroed in on apart from the main story for myself.
I think some of the sorcerers, when they were talking amongst themselves, they mentioned stuff like that. But definitely not the normal people
right
in the world. Not like in this story. They might do so. Like
go ahead.
Like some knowledge might have been lost over after the advent of the mystery.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, especially because they were able to. So I guess it was a presence of the Paravians that made the world resonate as it did, or made the magic of the world work as it did, perhaps, do you think? Or was it the Mistrate bogging it down to the point where it's hardly, maybe a combination of both?
Maybe both, yeah.
Yeah.
Still a lot of mystery to be unpacked there. It's still
Yeah.
600, 700 years there that
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll either get filled in or have to interpret from other events.
Yeah. Yeah. 600 years from now, we see that the Paravians are almost forgotten, right? They're the stuff of legend and myth. The bard that we meet in the first book doesn't believe that they exist, or that they ever existed. Is that? Yeah, I think so. So yeah, they've become the stuff of myth in just such a short span. Yeah. Mm,
People only care about unicorns in 600 years. That's it. That's
yeah.
all.
Yeah. There was one scene where Varane sees some saplings growing, and he sheds bitter tears. What I read into that was he knows that they're never going to grow up into big trees because of the Mistrates taking over the world. But yeah, did any of you notice / read anything different into that?
No, that's actually an excellent observation.
Didn't spot it.
And if I didn't lose my notes, I might have had that. But
That was probably there. It was probably there.
it might have been there. Yeah. We'll say that.
There's no point checking after the fact. Just be safe in the knowledge it was just probably there. I think that's very astute, though. Yeah, I sort of wondered if we were going to get a bit of bit from Vrain, actually, that he had a bit of foresight like the car. You know, it sort of hinted at that a few times, but it obviously never came to pass. But I wondered if that was kind of going to be an initiate's kind of calling, is that they would have some sort of foresight in the events that were going to happen before they go on board, but it didn't transpire.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, his fortune telling, or his prophecy, seemed a little different than Dakar's. Dakar's seemed very specific to specific event, and Lorraine seems a bit more big picture, for lack of a better word. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So rather than seeing individual events, he could see kind of the devastation of it afterwards. Looking down at the saplings, realize that they would never get any bigger. For instance,
Yeah.
For instance, you know, that's a nice idea.
Yeah, he was also talking about how the world will be covered in mist, but that hasn't happened yet. So it was some futuristic prediction, because for a while there I couldn't tell if he was just saying things that were happening elsewhere in the world, or if he's predicting future events. I think it might have been a combination of both. But yeah.
I kind of took it as future events, but I might have read that wrong too. So.
Oh, I guess it probably was. Like, he was headed towards the town because of the Materi invasion. But was it already happening? Was he predicting that it would happen? Yeah, it could probably, but near future predictions perhaps, but not really, because the Mistrate hasn't covered the world in mist yet. But he was talking about it in summer all the way until winter. It hasn't happened yet. Yeah.
I loved some of the extra description of the met snakes with the dorsal fins and all of that. You know, I was like, I like this level of detail. This taps into a certain part of my brain going, okay. And everything was sort of snake-like. You know, the snakes were a very big part of it. You know, I wonder if the fact that I'm Irish and we don't get snakes present.
You had the Carthials, and then there was even mention of like little insects.
Yeah.
That's like, it's like, that's like a breeding ground for nightmares.
How
Yeah,
how
here we have, we have these, we have snakes, we have, these little lizards on feet,
hmm,
with spines and poisons, um, and then we have, insects that will poison you, and we have flying things, and it's like, yeah, this place is messed up.
mhm. How terrifying were the Quetzals, bats and
Yeah.
snakes?
Yeah.
Oh man, with some magical powers. No. So even with the Meteri, we don't see them on the page, right? We only see the after effects of them, and they managed to be terrifying all the
Mhm.
same. Just like with the Paravians, they managed to be awe-inspiring, even though we never saw them on the page. But all similarly with these wraiths, no, what are they? Snakes. Anyway, these creatures, they managed to be incredibly terrifying. Especially, I think the scene with what they did with to Lysian was really bad, and also the scene with the watchtower guard, also whom we see. Uh, yeah, that was interesting how that was done too.
Yeah, and there seemed to be some just this like force of destruction going through an
Mm,
area,
yeah.
and not really, um, I guess, cognizant enough to like want to attack a singular person. It's just whatever gets in their way,
Mm,
kind of,
yeah.
and but still very sinister for all that. Um, and it made me wonder how would somebody like Sethan, how would he fight one of these things if he was always ready, like, and always was wary of them and had, and was ready for a fight of some sort, for protecting. And you would wonder how would he do that though? It almost seems like too much.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they do feel pretty indestructible, right? The ones that were outside the room where Varain was locked up, who did I didn't understand who killed them. It seems to be assumed that was the Fellowship sorcerer or one of the Paravians. Is that seems to be Satan's conclusion? But did we get any other clues as to what happened there?
I am not sure.
We don't really get. I mean, it's one of the things I was looking for the entire book. Is are we going to see Ascendir? Or are we going to see?
Yeah.
Because obviously, that came up, and the only one we ever see is
Lorraine.
Lehane.
Yeah.
And the only other person of any note we see is the Adept. Then that comes at the end. I think they're the only two people that were outside, and the Adept certainly doesn't seem like they would have had any part of that, especially given
Yeah.
the kind of the events that Varian goes through.
Mm,
So, I mean, we do like a mystery. I mean, that's
yeah.
kind of part of these books in general. Is this the kind of you fill in the blanks afterwards? What do you think could have happened there?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was probably in Jared's notes. To be fair, it was probably all. It was all there.
Yeah, not sure.
Cool. Do we want to? Is there anything else to talk about, or we could do outros and use a break point for the next video?
Sounds good.
Cool. Chibipoe, would you like to start us off?
Again, I'm Chibipoe. I can be found on Twitter on Chibipoe1 and the Page Chewing forums. Again, if you, have, like this series or want to try it out on an audiobook, please, check out my latest poll because I need more people to vote in it. And that's it. Jared?
I'm Jared. I run a Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel. And I am on the Page Chewing forum and pagechewing.com blog.
My name's Chris Moore. Sometimes make YouTube videos about movies or books, and can be found in the Page Tune forums as well. You can find me there, indeed.
Same. My name is Varsha. I also hang out on the Patreon forums a lot, and my YouTube channel is Reading by the Rainy Mountain if you're interested in checking that out. Yeah, cool. We'll see you again in a few weeks to discuss The Fugitive Prince. If you'd like to read that along with us, consider checking out the Patreon forum. You're welcome to discuss it with us here in these conversations or just on the forum on the forum topics. Cool. See everyone soon.